from the Common Communicator Manual, and doing speech number 2, which is organizer speak, opening, body, and conclusion. Cate will give an overview of the definition of organic food, what organic food labels mean, and what to avoid and why. The objectives of her speech are to select an appropriate outline which allows listeners to easily follow and understand your speech. She's to use supporting material, use appropriate transitions when moving from one idea to another, and create a strong opening and closing. Her speech is 5 to 7 minutes. Please welcome Cate.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Cate.
So, organic food. What exactly is organic food? Is it really healthier? And why? How does it cost more? These are the questions I'm going to answer for you today, and also I'll hopefully give you a few tips about when you should buy organic food, and it's most important to choose organic food. So, organic food means grown with certain standards that are put out by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. What those standards really mean are prohibited practices. And the prohibited practices include avoiding most synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. And that category actually includes something called synthetic sludge. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but I think I'm going to avoid it. Genetic engineering, a prohibited practice. Irradiated food, growth hormones, antibiotics, and artificial or synthetic additives. So, in order for food to be organic, the crops have to be grown with these prohibited practices for a minimum of 3 years. If you're talking about animal products, the standards involve the kind of feed you can give to animals, or the prohibition of antibiotics or growth hormones. Now, these first 3, the synthetic sludge I was talking about, the genetic engineering, and the growth hormones, those are referred to, I'm sorry, the irradiation, backwards. Those are called the big 3. And those are especially bad practices, and you'll hear more about them in a minute. But the big 3 are the worst of the prohibited practices. Now, interestingly enough, our organic labels apply to most produce, fruits, vegetables, meats, dairy, eggs, beans, legumes, but it doesn't apply to seafood. And I really never thought about that. When you go to the seafood store and you buy your wild salmon, organic there are no standards for seafood. So organic is not in the seafood category. Now, starting in 1990, the U.S. Department of Agriculture promulgated certain labeling standards, and that's because all the states had a variety of labeling and a variety of standards that were sort of a mishmash and weren't consistent with one another. So the U.S. Department of Agriculture promulgated some standards, and there are basically 4 typical categories. The 100% organic category, which you sadly won't see that very often. That's one of the least common labels. And that means everything in the food or the produce is 100% organic. The most common one, I'm sorry you can't see it that well, the little green label, which you'll see white on top, green on the bottom, and says USDA organic. What that means is there's no more than 5% of non-organic materials. So it has to be a minimum of 95% organic. And that other 5% can't be composed of any ingredients or product where the big 3 prohibited practices were involved. So there is a standard actually for that other 5% of the organic food, which is kind of interesting. And 70% organic, you'll see on food sometimes made with organic tomatoes, for example. And in that instance, it's no more than 30% of the ingredients or the product is non-organic, and again, can't be made with any of the big three prohibited practices, which are the worst three. And then finally, labeled by ingredient. If you'll look on, frozen food is a good example. I think Amy's, you'll turn over the box, and on the back it'll have ingredients made with organic carrots and potatoes, for example. You can't put that made with or by ingredient label on the front unless you meet the 70% minimum standard. But if it has organic ingredients, you can include those in the product list or the ingredient list on their packaging. Now, is organic food healthier? Well, not surprisingly, the answer is yes. Two important reasons. There's things in the organic food that are good for you, more nutrients, more vitamins and minerals. So there's things added to your organic food that are better for you than the non-organic equivalent. And then, of course, there are less contaminants, less pesticides, and less heavy metals and other bad materials for you. Now, beginning in about 1995, something called the Environmental Working Group came up with a list of the sort of worst offenders, called the Dirty Dozen. These are your produce items where, in the non-organic category, they are most likely to be contaminated with pesticides. And if you think about it, if you look at this list, strawberries, grapes, celery, cherry tomatoes, spinach, those are items that don't have any protective coating, like an orange or a banana. So if you're going to buy organic, when you're limited in how much organic food you're going to buy, I recommend stay away from the Dirty Dozen in terms of the non-organic or traditionally farmed foods. These are the ones where you really want to pick organic. And strawberries is my favorite. I want to typically always go for the organic strawberries because the non-organic equivalent has more they're more likely to be contaminated. Lastly, why is organic food cost more? Well, it's pretty simple economics, smaller scale. Much smaller scale than non-organic farming methods. About 4% of food in the U.S. that is purchased is organic. And of course, what the cost that you pay at the grocery store in your grocery bill doesn't include is the hidden cost, and that's the cost to our environment, because non-organic farming methods harm our land and our soil. I hope I've told you a few things about organic food today. If you want to know more, very simple way is to Google everything you need to know about organic food. You'll find a fascinating article there with a lot of links to some USDA websites and other websites that will give you even more than you wanted to know. And again, recommend those avoid the non-organic foods on the Dirty Dozen list. And I hope I told you a little bit about what you want to know about organic food this morning.